Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV 18's Mumbai newsroom. I'm Sonal Bhutra and with me is Pavitra Parekh. As always, you're watching Mutual Fund Corner. Well, last week, the SEBI released its consultation paper on total expense ratio across mutual fund schemes. This is to bring in transparency in the cost charged to unit holders. It basically accounts for the fees and expenses charged by AMCs to unit holders. What does it really mean? How will this proposal affect our viewers, the mutual fund holders, that is something that we'll address today. So lots to discuss and lot to understand today.
Oh, absolutely, and this is something that there's been so much discussion around anyway, right? But this is difficult to understand for someone who's not been tracking this space. So to help us break it down, really explain what this means, we have with us two very special guests. Anand Dalmia is co-founder and chief business officer at FISDIM, and we have Mohit Gang, who is joining us in the studios. He's chief executive officer at Moneyfront. Mohit, thanks a lot for coming down to our studios.
Thank you.
It's lovely to meet you and have you here in person. And let me just start with this very basic question of try to explain this paper to someone who has not been following it. If you just have to break it down in simple terms and explain it to someone who is looking to invest, how does this really impact them as well?
Okay, thank you so much for having me out here. So, look, I think what SEBI has done is a landmark thing in terms of how mutual fund industry is operating in this country. If I were to summarize this paper, and at a very top level, I think it brings in a lot of transparency. It makes mutual fund expenses true to label, which means whatever is now being shown to the investor is actually getting charged to the investor. Till now, that's not the practice, right? So a lot of transparency, making it true to the label, and reducing a lot of inefficiencies in the distribution channel and trying to curtail a lot of malpractices which are prevalent in the system. So overall, in getting to invest in mutual funds will get a lot cheaper for investors. A normal retail investor will find his returns getting enhanced and significantly enhanced over a long period of time. A lot of churning will stop. So at a top level, I think SEBI is from one arrow trying to kill all the malpractices, is also trying to get the economies of scale, the benefits which the industry has reaped over last decade or so, is trying to get that passed on to the final customer. Till now, it is somehow getting pooled with the AMCs and getting passed on to the distributor, but it's not reaching the final investor. So I think it's a brilliant move, and it solves a lot of inefficiencies in the system.
Okay, we take that point. So the total expense ratio could come down if this consultation paper is actually executed.
Mohit, something we were talking about as well when this paper initially came out is that the commissions on NFOs are very high, right? And we've seen so many NFOs come through this year as well. What do you think this will mean for that? Are we going to see less fund offers now because the commission has to be brought within a certain limit?
Look, Pavitra, I think the good part about this paper is SEBI lays out everything with proper illustrations and numbers. So what SEBI paper says is from a period of April 21 to September 22, there were around 86 new NFOs which were launched in this country. They mopped up around 86,000 odd crores, and out of that, 27% came from existing schemes of the same AMCs, which means those were all switches, right? And why were those switches happening? It's anybody's guess, because obviously the commission income in existing schemes was lesser, and the commission income being offered on the NFOs was way higher, and the money was being churned, right? And rampantly being churned. 30% is a huge number, right? So what SEBI has proposed is that anytime you try and do these kind of switches, the lower of the two schemes, the commission applicable will be the lower of the two schemes. So whenever you do the switch, you will only get commission. From A to B, you will get the commission, which is lower between the A and B schemes, right? So this kind of curbs a lot of malpractices in the system and takes out that churning angle. Also, one important data point which SEBI laid out in the report was that almost 83% of the funds were redeemed within 3 years of holding. So nothing crossed, only around 3 to 5% of the money was over 5 years in aging, which again is a very testing argument in support of this entire thing, that new schemes were being given to the customers. And this, to stop this, I think SEBI has taken the right measure of curbing this commission. One important thing which they also put out is the commission will now be an increasing structure. If you lay out a 3-year structure, it has to be increasing in order or equal in order. It can't be that the first year commission is higher and then second and third year are lower. So it has to be either increasing or equal.
Okay, so that is an important point, because commissions through the supply chain, that'll get impacted here. So Mohit, same question for you. Do you think it makes sense performance-wise TER? And also, since Anand also spoke about it'll be different for different schemes, benchmarks are different, but would it also mean that, say, X fund is doing better than Y fund, so the X investor will have to pay more charges here then?
Look, honestly, I think this kind of a practice globally is prevalent only in private equity and hedge fund industry. The profit sharing concept per se is not prevalent anywhere globally in the mutual fund industry. So SEBI is trying it. So good luck. But I think it's a very complicated calculation, as Anand also mentioned. It's not very easy to compute it at a retail investor level. But when it comes to performance, I think it's a hard fact. And truth be told, for a 10-year data, and SEBI puts out the data vividly in the paper itself, says only 40% of the schemes have outperformed benchmark or equaled benchmark performance. 60% have actually underperformed the benchmark. And the underperformance is extremely stark when it comes to large cap funds. So it's all the way glory for passives, right? So implementing this is a good step, right step in the direction that fund managers are pushed, but it can also needlessly push fund managers to take aggressive calls. So you also have to understand at the backdrop of it, this is all retail money, money hard earned, and when fund managers are doing dramatic calls with this kind of money, it can enhance the overall risk in the system also. So I think they'll have to weigh everything. As Anand rightly said, it's on the sandbox, and they have to test out many philosophies before they actually take it to public. They have actually put out two mechanisms in terms of how this will get implemented. But in case it comes out, I think from an investor's perspective, answering your second question, it's a good move. Honestly, I think investors either might end up paying less at the start when they enter the scheme, and they will pay only at the time of redemption. If they are earning profits, then they might not feel that pinch. If you're making decent amount of profits, you don't feel the pinch to pay out. And if you're not making profits, then you've obviously paid less through the lifespan of the scheme, right?
It might also encourage you to get in more, right? I mean, if you, it's kind of safeguarding your
absolutely. I think all these measures will go a long way in boosting the equity culture in the country. Honestly, when the costs go down, and that's a known concept across globally, when volumes tend to infinity, the cost comes to zero, right? So any industry you see, whether broking or anywhere, they've all the costs have got lowered over a long period of time. So from an investor's perspective, a profit sharing where fund managers' skin is in the game in terms of whether their earnings they're able to make that much money or not, and if their incentives also linked to it. I think finally it's a win-win for all in the system, but it's a tough implementation. It's a tough road ahead.
Okay, tough, and maybe a while away from where we are right now. But Mohit, Anand, it's been a very interesting chat so far. We have lots more questions as well, but we're going to quickly take a short break and come back. We'll continue our discussion in just a bit. Mohit, we've spoken about a lot of the positives, right? That this can help the investors, it's going to bring down costs. Do you see any negatives as well over here in the, either in the product or in the switch and the sort of move to this kind of different TER?
Oh, totally. Look, any coin will have both sides to it, right? And it's a known thing that when you implement these kind of changes, you will have some marginal impact on various players. To begin with, I think the distributor fraternity, which is the biggest proponent through which the product is reaching the hinterlands of the country and is penetrating to a mass level, I think that might be a little disincentivized vis-a-vis other products. Even today, when you see, Pavitra, margin compared to an insurance product or any other product also, let's say a bank deposit, not a bank deposit, but a corporate deposit or bonds or any other product, the margins in mutual fund distribution are wafer thin, right? So, though SEBI argues that the industry has reached a particular scale over last 10 years, it's grown from 8 lakh crores to 40 lakh crores, but still the industry is not anywhere compared to the size of a fixed deposit industry or an insurance industry in the country. So the distributor margin shrinks. The incentive to sell rightly a mutual fund product, which is a very good asset to hold for a client, also decreases, and the incentive to push other products, which is insurance and your various other products, increases. So you will see an increased push in those kind of products. To me, that will be the biggest disadvantage. There are other side effects to the entire thing. I think the switches clause on the NFOs, which gives you the lower of the commission of the two schemes, if applicable, once a client switches from debt to equity, I think the paper is silent on that. The STPs which go in the system, which is systematic transfer plans from liquid funds to equity, will get hugely impacted if that happens. But I'm sure because it's a consultation paper and suggestions will go in, that should ideally get addressed. Right. So I think those are few big ones. Other than that, I think industry still needs some boost to grow. Look, finally the participants in the industry, and no industry today thrives at a 50 bips margin, honestly, and you can go world over and kind of see how many industries survive with that kind of margin. It is boosting players who play at a scale. And the marginal players who are very small in the system might find it very difficult to sustain. New entrants in the distribution business will find it very difficult to come in because the entry barrier is too high. Your payback period to come in this business and make money is extremely large, right? So I think those are few disincentives.
On that note, we're going to wind down on this edition of Mutual Fund Corner. Thank you guys very much for tuning in. We have closing bell up next for the final hour of trade.